Welcome into WarUp on the WPIAL. Greg Warnock alongside Jeff Upson, bringing you all the coverage from the PIAA Team Championships, and we're getting set for the individual portion of wrestling action, postseason action coming up. Jeff, you got the opportunity to go out to the Giants Center. Have you recovered from your weekend away?
Yeah, I mean, recovered is a good. Yeah, I've recovered. Yesterday was like a very. I think I slept most of the day yesterday between updating rankings and putting some content out. But yeah, it's not as bad as individuals, but they are long days in the Giant Center for sure.
Well, we had a chance to see the WPIAL have its most teams take the mats, uh, three of which in Double A, four teams in Triple A, and overall, obviously, I think you could say Double A maybe not the performance they wanted, but overall, I thought they wrestled tough, and Triple A more of the same. But let's start things off in Double A, and at the top of the bracket where Burgestown had a very tight 31-30 loss to Brookville. And you look at that match. I mean, they didn't have Gavin Sweeka the entire postseason. We'll see if he's able to come back here for individuals, but not able to wrestle the entire team portion, and that really just hurt Burgestown.
Well, I mean, not only did it hurt him here in Hershey, but it hurt him, in the WPIAL championships as well.
You could arguably say. I mean, you can kind of go back and forth on it, but they maybe WPIAL champs if he's in the lineup. So
Yeah, there's a lot of if ends, and hypothetical situations. But
yep.
the fact of the matter is, he's a key component to their lineup, and he's not in it. They were very close with Brookville. I thought, they wrestled really hard, really tough. I thought Brookville looked flat in that match, to be honest with you, because I thought there was a few weights there where Brookville was going to get some bonus and get some major decisions, and they didn't. So I thought Burgettstown wrestled really tough in that. I would say all the WPIAL teams in the first round wrestled pretty tough. Quaker Valley gave Saucon Valley all they could handle. In fact, they were up in a few matches before they got pinned, so that could have been a different story. But, Burgettstown was right there. Kovac had a good win over Carson Weaver. Lankos got a fall right out of the gate. Senepal got a fall over Popson, who's not bad at all. There was a few toss-up matches. Cole Householder over Dylan Slovic. I thought that was a toss-up. And Logan Oakes for Brookville got a fall to kind of set things in motion. They kind of switched between him and Joey Senepal, and then Rudy Brown got a forfeit. So it was 31-30. Brookville does have a 38-pounder. His name's Owen Reinsel, and he did not wrestle. So having him in the weight class would have helped as well. But overall, I thought Brookville wrestled well against, or Burgettstown wrestled well against Brookville.
Yeah, and to skip down to Quaker Valley for a second before we talk about Burrell. Quaker Valley, I mean, you mentioned it. I mean, they had two matches where they were winning. You look at 132 pounds, Michael Carmody, he was up 4-3, and he gets pinned with 10 seconds left in the match. You got Justin Ritchie, who was up 10-5, and then he gets pinned at 152. You win those two matches, you defeat Saucon Valley.
Who ended up winning the state championship, right? And
right.
And I think, I think looking at that match, I was not impressed with Saucon Valley after watching them against Quaker Valley, and that's not a dig on Quaker Valley, but I just with a rejuvenation with Ryan Crookham in the lineup, Jared Roan in the lineup, and just having the flexibility, I thought, man, Saucon Valley's they're gonna challenge Notre Dame. And after the match with Quaker Valley, I'm like, man, they did not look like a state championship team. And it showed just based on the fact that, they got, I wouldn't say lucky in a few matches, but I would say 132, they got lucky. Connor Nichols, that was, I was right there. It was on the mat right in front of me on mat 1. And I was just like, man, that was huge, for Saucon Valley. And, Saucon Valley is coached by the folks that kind of invented the cement mixer, or the special, as I like to call it out in the Lehigh Valley. I mean, it's you got to know it's coming. A flying cement mixer, all of those things, you got to know they're coming, because they call it junk wrestling for a reason. I mean, you can go from getting beat up to pinning people left and right, and they did that in quite a few matches. So overall, I thought Quaker Valley looked great, and I thought after that match, they're going to wrestle back. They're going to, come out to at least the Conci quarterfinals. I thought they were going to come out and make it to at least a match with Bishop McDevitt, and they lost to Forest Hills, who I kind of underappreciated how they were going to wrestle in Hershey, because they came out and won 32-29. So it's the slightest margins in Hershey. I mean, there's so many matches here, so many dual meets that were decided by one match, one individual bout, and 1 point. And, that team goes on to win 3 in a row or something like that. There's just the smallest of margins here that it makes a huge difference, right? I mean, we talk about it, but we see it play out in reality when they get to Hershey.
Yeah, the other WPIAL team mentioned Burrell in the Courtney round of 16. They also lost 34-27 to Bishop McDevitt, like you mentioned, Jeff. And in that one they just weren't able to win those couple of those close ones. You talked about it in the preview, how strong Bishop McDevitt was up top from 145 on up, and that's where they won their matches. 145 on up. They did sneak a fall in at 126, and that ends up being the difference.
Yeah, they started, I mean, it's crazy because it started in a perfect spot for Bishop McDevitt, because Bishop McDevitt, there's 7 weights from 45 all the way to 285. I'm hard pressed to find a lineup in the state in double A that's as strong as that lineup from Bishop McDevitt. But I felt pretty good at the turn, thinking that Burrell was really in this, because Guilfoyle only gets a decision. Yeah, they give Christie a forfeit. Glessner got a major on Zanella, which I thought was a huge major for Bishop McDevitt. Lawler beats Damian Barr 10-8. Toss-up match there, but then Bryce Enders only gets a decision on Cole Clark, which was huge. Cade Warner, he got a close decision on Luke Boylan. So you look at those 2 matches, 89 and 215. I think they could have went either way, and obviously 72 as well. Forfeit, you exchange forfeits from 285 and 106. Zanella gets a decision. I thought he could have maybe put it on Butler a little bit more. Hornack gets a forfeit, but really Artel at 26 was the difference maker. Him getting that fall at 26 was that was a nail in the coffin, essentially, because it didn't matter what Farah or Lisinski did at 32 and 38. Bishop McDevitt was already in the driver's seat at that point. So 26 was obviously the factor there. And but it was that close, again, that close to pull in the upset, if you want to call it an upset.
Yeah, I mean, Artel, he was winning 2-0 at the time with the fall with 11 seconds left in that match. And, if you get a decision there from Newell, all of a sudden Burrell wins the match. Or if you're looking at, Damian Barr getting a win, Cole Clark, I mean, a number of guys who, battled tough for Burrell. And, overall, I thought they wrestled really well, though. I mean, to be that close, like you said, it was really, I thought all 3 WPIAL teams, despite losing in the round of 16, all 3 wrestled very tough.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a lot of things that could have went different ways. Burrell wrestled Corey, who I thought was really impressive, and then they lose to Boiling Springs. Boiling Springs was probably the team that impressed me, surprised me the most, because they're runner-ups in District 3, and they come all the way back to finish 4th in the state. So, they had a really great tournament, a great run, as they normally do. But Burrell and Boiling Springs have wrestled a dozen times in the last 20 years, I feel like, in the Giant Center. So that was a tough one. As I mentioned, you look at what Burgettstown was able to do in the championship round. They couldn't get past Faith Christian, who was within 1 point of beating Benton. They were very, very close to beating Benton, and then things just kind of fell apart a little bit for them late. But Faith Christian beats Burgettstown, and then West Perry from District 3 a 3rd place. District 3 had a phenomenal tournament in Double A. West Perry, Boiling Springs, and Bishop McDevitt were all alive on Saturday. So District 7, the WPIAL, obviously we wanted them to come back with a medal, but for the teams that they got there, it kind of went as expected, right? I think we weren't really too surprised. I thought maybe Quaker Valley could squeeze out a few wins, and I thought Burrell would battle, which they did. So I'm not saying that they didn't wrestle to our expectations. I think they did.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that for sure. And I mean, I think some of the matchups as well didn't really go the way I saw. Burgestown, Joey Vigilati posted they didn't win a single toss the entire postseason, 0-8, and the toss is just huge, especially in the Giants Center. Like you mentioned, one match is the difference. You don't get the matchups you want, you may not win. And if it's just that one match difference, then you got that toss. I think people don't realize how important it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for non-wrestling folks and even just fringe fans to understand how critical the flip is. And I heard that as well as they were leaving. I was talking to a few Burgestown folks, and they said, they were like, we're 0-8 for the coin flip, and I'm just like, that's insane. Down the stretch like that. I mean, that's got to be the worst luck, because you figure, all right, 50 you're going to get at least one or two here, but to go 0-8 when the flip matters in these types of matches, right? And and a lot of people say, well, it shouldn't matter, but it does, right? It does matter significantly when you're talking about shuffling the lineup, moving guys, getting guys where you want them, and the matchups you want. It's really critical. So yeah, that's that's just really bad luck. I hope their luck turns. Not only do they lose Gavin Suika, but then they just lose every toss, 8 in a row. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then, if how far they would have gotten, I'm not really sure. But at the end of the day, losing that many flips is definitely troublesome. And I'm not sure how many Burrow or Quaker Valley lost it in theirs. But I mean, again, you could just kind of tell even that Quaker Valley Forest Hills match. They didn't have the right. They didn't get the matchups they wanted, right? Because if that's the case, you're not sending Jack Diamond out against Jackson Arrington. So you just kind of, it just happens. You know what I mean? You got to go with what the flip goes with, and sometimes it doesn't go your way.
Yeah, I mean, that was one where I was, again, maybe I overlooked Forest Hills and their capabilities, but I thought Quaker Valley was in the driver's seat for that. Mason Dimert gets a decision, which I thought, he pins essentially everybody he wrestles, especially anyone who likes to mix it up with him on the mat. I was expecting him to get 6 there, which would have tied it essentially. So, and then Logan Ritchie gets a forfeit there at 120. But there was obviously a lot of things. Again, thin margin, right? At 132. You had a 1-point match, an 8-7 match that went in favor of Forest Hills. You flip that, Dimer gets a fall. It's Quaker Valley, right? And we're having a different conversation. So, again, no shame in what the effort was from these guys. It's just that a lot of things have to go right in order for a team to advance. It's one match at a time. It's one bout at a time. And, you can tell the teams that have experience in the Giant Center, because it's very much a methodical approach to, Dave Kroll, for example, from Nazareth. I mean, my gosh, the way he approaches the state team tournament, even the District 11 team tournament, it's just very methodical on matchups, on personnel, where you want them, getting your guys to know what their role is and what the responsibility is. So it's, again, smallest errors, smallest margins, that's the difference.
Now let's look over into AAA, and for the WPIAL in the championship bracket, Jeff, I think it went as expected. For Bethlehem Catholic to knock off 3 WPIAL teams to get to the finals: Cannon, McMillan, Connellsville, and Latrobe. Waynesburg gets to the semifinal, has the tough loss against Nazareth, and coming down into the finish in 3rd place. But the consolation bracket may not win as well for the WPIAL. But let's first talk about the championship side. Greater Latrobe gets 2 big wins in the round of 16 and the quarters over Council Rock South and Central Dauphin, but the Council Rock South matchup ends up being very costly because Nate Roth re-injures his shoulder, unable to go. That was a 9-point swing. He was winning 8-3 at the end of the second period when that happened. So it looked as if that 9-point swing, they may not be able to overcome the match against Council Rock South. but they do, and they end up getting the 28-23 win. But again, they don't have Nate Roth for the rest of the team portion. Looks like he's not going to be available for individuals, and it just really set Latrobe back.
Yeah, and well, first of all, let's not call the Latrobe win over CD a big win, because CD is not they're not good. I'll just tell you that right now. And we expected them to get, it was not a surprise to see Latrobe, if they were going to win against Council Rock, I'll make it to the semifinals. But that match with Council Rock South, and I talked to Brad Sillen-Perry, the head coach of Council Rock South, extensively about this, and he was like, "Look, that's." We don't want to win that way, with Nate Roth going down. He's like, even if, we lose that match and other things go our way, he says, you never want to win a match when a wrestler gets injured like that. Nate Roth has to go to Hershey Medical Center and his shoulder. It's just a terrible situation to a kid that has been through so much already, physically, mentally. Think about his career and his trajectory. I mean, I can remember him beating Jace Ross at regionals, then getting the injury that ends his season. Jace Ross goes on to medal at states, right? Never really gets into a flow last year. This year, he comes back. First match back, he beats returning state champion Briar Priest. It's like, and then you go to the team tournament and it's like deja vu, man. I mean, kid can't catch a break. I feel awful for him and for his family and for his teammates. I mean, that's just, and his coaches. I mean, it's just terrible. Greater Latrobe does survive that match with Council Rock South, even though things didn't necessarily go their way. It started off really with a bang, because Corey Barrera, he got a decision over Lucas Doyle, 5-2, which that was a rematch from King of the Mountain. That was a overtime match last time. But then Wyatt Held drops a close 2-1 match at heavyweight. I thought that was a swing match as well. Willishell does his job, gets a major decision. Then Leo Joseph wins a toss-up against Luke Ryder at 113 pounds. Again, one that I thought was a toss-up. But the biggest match was Lucio Angelico at 120 pounds. That was the critical bout, in my opinion, that set Latrobe up nicely, because after that, you knew what you were going to get from Council Rock South. They were very strong at 45-52. In fact, Jack Pletcher takes a loss to Bekru Sadarinov, 1-0. That was a really tight match. But then Wyatt Schmucker, he got the fall over Cirillo at 160. I would say him and Angelico were probably the biggest wins for Latrobe. And then, of course, Tyler Lynch, he ices it with a win over Tom Woolashan. So overall, Latrobe, they gutted that one out, man. They really did. They gutted that one out from top to bottom, right out of the gate at 215 all the way back to 189. Even their guys that lost, other than Jacob Braun, who gave up a major at 132, even their guys that lost, I thought did their job. Golden only gave up a decision. Snyder only gave up a major to Collegiesi. That's huge. I mean, Collegiesi's the number one ranked guy in the state, and Sam Snyder could have easily been pinned in that a few times, and he fought off, and that's again, saving team points is so critical. So just a lot of close bouts, a lot of good matches, and it was an intense atmosphere. And after Roth went down, you could hear a pin drop on the Latrobe sideline, and I think they were seriously not only concerned about the outcome, but obviously Nate Roth himself. So, like you said, that was a pretty big swing. You go from winning to giving up 6 to Gavin Cole. That changes the complexity of the match. But I think that kind of set them in motion. Schmucker and Lynch they did their jobs, and they did it well to have them advance.
Yeah, and then they move on to face Central Dauphin. I know you said they weren't any good, but still a good win for them whenever they don't have Nate Roth in the lineup.
Sorry about that, Greg.
That's all right. I don't know what happened there, but I was just mentioning, Jeff, I know you mentioned Central Dauphin isn't good, but still to be able to lose Nate Roth is such a huge point swing, right? Because now they give up a major decision at 138 as opposed to where he maybe wins that match. So, you start looking at, I mean, as we talked about in the state tournament, losing any amount of points can be tough to overcome, but Latrobe was able to do it in back-to-back matches.
Yeah, they were. And, despite that, they went into that match with Bethlehem Catholic, and I talked to Jeff Karam right after that match, and he was like, they're a tough team. Latrobe's a really, really good team. And Bethlehem Catholic just too much, right? They're just too much, and clearly they're one of the best teams in the state for a reason. They're loaded, right? And their guys were just, they got wins at there was nowhere to hide, man. There was just so much firepower there that there's nowhere to breathe. They just smother you. 152, Andrew Harmon, again, another 1-0 decision over Jack Pletcher. So Pletcher had, he had a difficult time at Hershey, losing 1-0 to two guys that I think he would have to battle with in Hershey in order to get a medal. Overall, Bethlehem Catholic they're super strong, right? And we saw that, right? So they rightfully so, went on and won a state title. But Greater Latrobe they were in that fight. They were there. They battled, but just not enough to overcome that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it for the WPIAL, they end up losing all three teams to Bethlehem Catholic, 51-12 for Ken McMillan's loss. Connellsville's was 50-8, and Bethlehem Catholic beats Latrobe 46-12. But they're just so loaded and so deep that it's hard to overcome. Bethlehem Catholic and their strength. Connellsville obviously had a big win, 67-6 over LaSalle to get to that quarterfinal match. Talk about those three teams here in a minute in the consolation side, but first Waynesburg, a couple of big wins over Dallastown, 45-21, and Mifflin County 31-24, before dropping a 38-17 loss to Nazareth. The biggest thing here, Jeff, was at 120 pounds they had the Russell Xavier Harmon, Joe Simone not in the lineup, and that definitely made an impact. Not sure if it makes a difference as far as their standing. I still think they probably finish in third place. But certainly when you lose a guy like that, it's tough, and they just couldn't really overcome it.
Yeah, and like you said, I don't think it would have. I still think they would have ended up third with Joe in the lineup. He's having a hard time making 120, and that's ultimately he's got to be ready to go for individuals, but for the team portion, that just. It hurts them, but I don't think it would have changed the outcome, as you mentioned. That Mifflin County match may not have been as close, but they don't wrestle Kai at 113 against Nick Allison. So overall, Waynesburg and Mifflin County, I thought, kind of went as expected. You knew that they were going to battle in a few weights, but it just wasn't. They weren't going to have enough to overcome Waynesburg, Dallastown, same thing. I thought Dallastown actually wrestled really. That was another match that was right in front of us, and I thought Dallastown wrestled Waynesburg pretty tough, which I wasn't really expecting. But that match with Nazareth kind of went as I expected, because even though it started at a weight where I thought it favored Waynesburg, because you get a tech fall from Mac Church, you get a decision at 38, but then you throw out Cole Hammond at 45, and it was just great to see him on the mat in Hershey. That may be the last time we ever see him in Hershey, which, for him, that was an emotional roller coaster for him. And he wrestled against a guy who he's close with, who he knows very well, and Nick Foster. There's a great story out there. Tom Hausnick of the Morning Times did an article on that, and if you have a chance, definitely go and check that out. But you lose that match, and all of a sudden things start changing a little bit, because then Dom Wheatley gets a major. Fairchild got a fall over Kirby. I wasn't necessarily expecting that. They forfeit at 172. Rocco gets a decision at 189. Rocco's going up to 189, and Chase Levy's a 215-pounder who he and Sonny Sasso kind of split time at 189. So, I wasn't surprised to see him only get a decision, because that's a good amount of weight you're giving up, right? One of the better matches was Sean Kinney and Noah Tustin at heavyweight. Noah Tustin looked really good battling Sean Kinney, but Sean Kinney just down the stretch just kind of put him away. And then Tahir Parkins beat Kai Sheptick. Charlie Bunting got a fall, and then Braxton Apello got a really close decision with Xander Fatoris, who I thought had a good weekend. So, we kind of expected that. You add Joe Simone in there at 120. Him and Bunting are a toss-up. So maybe it's 35-20 instead, but I still think, Nazareth was the team that was going to make it to the finals.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much you could really change outside of that. I mean, like you said, instead of a fall, Simone gets a win, 32-20. Maybe Kirby doesn't give up the fall because he was losing 5-1 in the third period when he gives up that fall. So now it's 29-20. Maybe he keeps it to a decision. But I don't know how much else you really could change if you're Waynesburg to be able to get that win.
Yeah, and that's no shame because we knew coming into this, having Cole Hammett not be Cole Hammett and losing everything that they lost last year, and they did get a 6-pounder for Hershey, but it just wasn't. We just knew that they were going to have a hard time. But even still, look at what they did in the wrestlebacks, because this is really where you make your money, right? I mean, it's hard wrestling back from a semifinal position, dropping down, and immediately getting a team that's hot. And the team that they got was the team that they wrestled in the WPIAL finals, who had just whipped up on Abington Heights 50-17. So Connellsville overall. So you look at their opening round match. I thought they wrestled. Well, actually, after LaSalle, I didn't even really consider that. The LaSalle match wasn't even a match, right? But that match with Bethlehem Catholic, I did not think that they wrestled particularly well. I thought it would be a lot closer with Bethlehem Catholic. Some of their guys just, Gabe Rosario, he gave up a fall in under a minute to Dante Frenzy. Layton gave up a major to McIntyre. Lonzie Velma lost at 45 to another freshman, Charlie Scanlon, which again, I think, those are matches that you expect Connellsville to be in there with. And Kessler gets a major on their backup, Trey Miletics. No shame in that because Miletics is a state qualifier from last year. Zach Bingham, I thought, wrestled well, only keeping Landon Muth to a decision. But then Luke Thomas gets a major. Dennis Nicholson stops the bleeding by getting a major, and then you kind of expect the other results at 106 and 113. But that was without Nate Desmond. Okay, that's one guy who they did not have in the lineup, and he's the number one ranked guy in the state. So even without him, they still were able to put 50 on a very tough Connellsville team. So I was impressed to see Connellsville bounce back in the consolation round, beating Quakertown. That was a nice match there because Quakertown was looking good, and then beating up Abington Heights, who I thought had a good tournament, and then to keep it very, very close with Waynesburg. There's no shame in what Connellsville, the way they wrestled in Hershey, despite that 50 point loss to Bethlehem Catholic.
Yeah, I mean, Connellsville definitely, able to cut the score, right? I mean, Evan Petrovich, a 6-5 win over Kai Sheptick. Mac Church only gets a 6-5 win. I mean, I know it was also a decision over Chad Ozias last time, but Ozias keeps it closer. Lonzie Vilma gets an overtime win over Colton Stone King in that match. So just some really big results for Connellsville. And we talked about it, though. For Connellsville to come away with a medal, they just had a tough spot in the bracket. They'd have to either beat Bethlehem Catholic or they were going to have to beat the loser of Waynesburg and Nazareth. That was the only way that they were going to get a medal. And all year long, I think it's been talked about that these are the top three teams: Bethlehem Catholic, Nazareth, and Waynesburg. So, it's definitely a tough spot for Connellsville. I mean, they could make the argument that, hey, we're the fourth best team. But, at the end of the day, they challenged Waynesburg and gave them everything they had.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right in terms of they could make the argument that they're fourth best team. I would love to see them in Williamsport go at it. And it was just the fact that how the bracket laid out that you're right. They were going to have to beat one of the top three teams in the state in order to get there. And like you said, that Waynesburg match, they flipped the script on a few of those. Obviously Church getting that 6-5 win. It was a decision last time, but it just felt closer. Lonzie Vielma getting that tiebreaker win again over Stone King, which was huge. But then Brody Evans got a decision over George Schultz 2-1. I thought that was a toss-up match. Dennis Nicholson only gives up a decision to Makel. And then Petrovich switching the script on Sheptick and Layton getting a major decision. He was 1 point away from getting a tech. So now it's 27-26, right? So just a few other things could have went their way. They win one of those toss-up matches. That's completely within their reach and their grasp. And that's, of course, without Joe Simone, because Layton gets a major on Xavier Harmon. But, if there was a time to do it, it was then, right? Because, they smelled blood in the water. But Waynesburg showed a lot of resiliency coming back, knowing they're without Joe Simone, coming back and getting not only a win there, but then a win against a very tough Williamsport team, 31-30. So, again, Williamsport had to go through the gauntlet too a little bit. They had to wrestle Nazareth, then they come back, they beat Council Rock South, beat Mifflin County, then they beat Latrobe, and then they fall to Waynesburg. I mean, Williamsport was tested, no doubt. So I would like to see them and Collinsville go at it for sure.
Yeah, and Waynesburg gets the 1-point win, but keep in mind, not only obviously no Simone, but Xavier Harmon did get a win in that match, but no Mac Church. He was
Right.
dealing, I know, with some injuries as well, but he has that win over Braden Bauer already this season. That's a 9-point swing, which is huge.
Yeah, no doubt that things would have been different had Mac Church been in the lineup. No, I'm not discounting that. All I'm saying is Williamsport, they battled, right? They battled, and I would have liked to see them and Collinsville wrestle, because if you look at some of the results, they have very similar results. But again, that's the way the bracket shook out, and overall, it went kind of as expected. It went chalk. The top 4 teams in the state, when we had the rankings coming into the state dual team tournament, it was 1, 2, 3, 4. They finished 1, 2, 3, 4. So the top 10 in AAA did not change from last week to this week in the state rankings, because it all kind of went as expected. Things could have went differently, though. That's the thing that we love about team wrestling is a lot of things could have went differently. They just didn't happen to do that in AAA. AA, I would say a lot of things kind of went a little haywire. So that made it a little bit more interesting, but still, at the end of the day, a lot of good wrestling in Hershey. We got to see a lot of good individual matchups. I would have liked to see more, but when you are in that team aspect, it's get your bonus, get the matchups you want. So we don't always see those big time matchups that we want to see.
Not to go back to AA, but do you think it really went haywire? I mean, I think Stockholm Valley, Notre Dame GP were the 1-2 kind of whole time. Chestnut Ridge was that solid number 3, could get into that top 2 mix. I mean, I think the top 3 kind of went as expected. The number 4, I think, was a surprise, but
yeah,
top 3,
so I meant more in terms of the top 10. So the top 10, Boiling Springs and McDevitt and West Perry. West Perry was a third out of District 3, and they were into wrestling on Saturday. I didn't know if they were going to beat Montgomery. In fact, I thought Montgomery was going to beat them on the prelim night on Monday. So that's what I mean by haywire. The top 3, yeah, I mean, sure, but you look at what Saucon Valley was, they lost twice to Notre Dame GP. So I know it would have been, yeah, sure, it very easily could have flipped, but it didn't happen in AAA, and I thought it could happen in AAA too. So the fact that they found a way to beat Notre Dame, and then Boiling Springs somehow making it to the 4th place, finishing in 4th place, that kind of sent it a little haywire. It was a lot more haywire than AAA. I can just put it that way, because there was just a lot more interesting results, and a little bit more shock, at some of the results.
Williamsport ended up beating Latrobe 36-30, by the way, to get to that 3rd and 4th place match. And obviously with Nate Roth in the lineup, maybe you're looking at a 33-33 score, or even more if Roth picks up a bonus in that 138-pound matchup. So just the slight variation there. Cannon McMillan, we haven't had a chance to talk about them much, Jeff, but they had obviously a tough loss to Bethlehem Catholic. They defeat LaSalle, and then they ended up dropping a 45-23 match to Mifflin County.
Yeah, so that was, I actually had in my predictions, I had Cannon Mac beating Mifflin County, and then Williamsport and Cannon Mac wrestling in what I thought would be a good match. But, Cannon Mac, they beat the crap out of Cumberland Valley. And me being a Central Dolphin guy, I always love to see Cumberland Valley get the snot beat out of them. But, man, Cannon Mac drove 3.5 hours on Monday, or more, probably 4 hours, out to Mechanicsburg, PA, beat the crap out of Cumberland Valley, drove back, and then drove right back on Thursday in order to wrestle Bethlehem Catholic, the number 1 team in the state. So props to them. They beat them 44-14, Cumber Valley. They battled Becca, but we knew it wasn't going to be very close, right? We just knew that they had a little bit too much. And I hate to say it, and we said this on the recap show, but Becca rested like 4 starters in that match too. So that just shows you how damn good Becca really is, because they put 50 up on Cannon Mac, and that was with 4 backups essentially. So, but that match with Mifflin County, it was 45-23, but I think it was a little bit closer than that. You had a few tiebreaker and ultimate tiebreaker matches. Declan Schaeffler beat Sol 6-5 in ultimate tiebreaker. You had a few other matches that could have went either way. Again, Cannon Max without Stafford, who I think would make a difference up in the 189, 172 range. So overall, I don't think Cannon Max should be upset with how they wrestled. They are certainly content, I'm sure, with the way they competed, and I'm sure they would have liked to have that Mifflin County match back, but I don't think they're too upset by their performance.
Well, Jeff, you brought up an interesting point as we kind of wrap up the team side, and that's with Bethlehem Catholic resting some of their starters. A conversation that always comes up during the team portion, and I know you're planning to have a roundtable discussion a little later on, so don't want to take too much away from it, but a lot of people feel, and it's warranted, right, that Bethlehem Catholic, Notre Dame Green Pond does its recruiting and being able to, I shouldn't say recruit, but a lot of people feel that way. That those teams bring wrestlers in and make these super teams, right? I mean, Bethlehem Catholic, to have that many good wrestlers is just unreal. So, what are your thoughts around, how can this be combated for the team portion?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex issue, and I took a little. I was surprised to see how many keyboard warriors there were this weekend that wanted to just kind of do some drive-by, shots in the dark at people and at teams and coaches and things like that. And what I tweeted out, which is why we're trying to do a roundtable discussion where we can actually do a dive that's deeper than just 240 characters on Twitter. But it's a complex issue. There's a lot of layers. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of factors that go into it. It's not just I look at it kind of like I do politics. You're either on one side all the way over here, and nothing anyone else says is going to change your mind, or you're over here and nothing that this person says is going to change your mind, right? It's much like having Thanksgiving dinner with a family member that is completely right or completely left, and I live my life in the middle, and with wrestling and private versus, boundary, non-boundary, look, in wrestling, it does play a factor, no doubt. You can't say it's not a factor. Clearly it's a factor. However, I will pose this to you. A lot of good teams, not all good teams, majority of really good programs have some level of move-ins to their school district, including public schools, right? Including public schools. Waynesburg's a AA school, right? They're a AA size schools. They have a few guys from outside of Pennsylvania that came in. Xander Fatoris was in Arizona. He's in Pennsylvania now. Joe Simone was in Missouri, come to Pennsylvania now. I'm not saying that's a good thing, bad thing, right, wrong, or indifferent, but the fact of the matter is you have a boundary school that has some folks from outside of Pennsylvania, right? Then you have Notre Dame Green Pond that has some wrestlers from another state. So, it's like, well, you've got more than me. You're getting people from all over. Well, I know a lot of, quote, public schools that have wrestlers from different districts. So you can't really say this blanket statement that it's only these non-boundary schools that are a problem. Because if that's the case, let's just say this, all Catholic schools and non-boundary schools, boom, you're gone. Okay, that's great. That leaves Nazareth and Waynesburg, right? They're the top 2 teams in the state. Well, guess what? Both those teams have guys that moved into the school districts. and you could argue for wrestling, So I don't listen. I like tough wrestling. I'm like Terry and Tom Brands. I like tough wrestling. I don't give a shit where you're from or what state you claim. I like good wrestling, and Pennsylvania has benefited. The state of Pennsylvania as a whole has benefited from being the hotbed of wrestling and having wrestlers that want to compete in Pennsylvania. There's no doubt about it. Bethlehem Catholic has made Nazareth better. Waynesburg has made Canon-Mac better. Canon-Mac has made Collinsville better, and vice versa. Like, all these different schools kind of make each other better. A good friend of mine, Brad Wilson from out District 11, he has to deal with this a whole heck of a lot, and he's been doing this since I was in short pants. But he essentially said, he's like, you guys all complained about Bethlehem Catholic, and everyone, he's like, find a way to get better, and he always says Nazareth found a way. And it's a complex issue, Greg, and I'm a little, as you can tell, a little triggered by the fact that a lot of people just have these boisterous opinions, and they think it's only one way or the other. And the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of gray, there's a lot of factors, and I love it because I've heard teams, I've heard coaches that I know have gotten other kids from other school districts on Facebook, on Twitter, saying, yeah, this is great, I'm so glad Notre Dame lost. I'm like, that you're hypocrite, you're throwing stones in glass houses all day, every day. So I would say it is what it is. It ain't never going away. We're always going to have these discussions. And if you're operating under a set of rules, and again, I love it when people say, well, I will say this, and during our roundtable discussion that we're going to be having, hopefully later this week, if not next week, with some folks across the state to really dive deep into this. But you take away the private and schools and the public schools, the Catholic schools, and you say, okay, you're in one class. Jersey has got a lot of things right. I think the Jersey model is one that we should probably look into, if not adopt. But again, that can be a whole nother segment, and I don't want to take a lot of time to go through that. But just know that if you think you're going to solve the problem on Twitter in 240 characters, you are part of the problem, in my opinion.
Well, the other question I saw a lot come up on social media this past week was the punishment laid down to Bishop McCourt, right? It was upheld at the federal level, but they get this severe punishment, whereas Bethlehem Catholic, Notre Dame, Green Pond, who, those folks you mentioned, feel that this is the same way, right? That they do the exact same thing, yet Bishop McCourt's getting everything thrown at them. So how would you differentiate those?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of differentiation between, who challenges it, right? So ultimately, and if you look at the rules, and this is something that I consider myself pretty up to date on, and looking into it, that's kind of part of what I do, and you look at how you challenge that, right? It's up to that school district that's losing that wrestler to challenge it. Forest Hills challenged something. They said, we're calling BS on this. We're challenging this, and it opened the floodgates, right? If there's certain school districts that are content with the fact that they have a wrestler that went to another school and no one challenges it, I can't. If I'm in Western Pennsylvania and I'm pissed off about what's going on in the East, and I'm an AD, there's nothing I'm going to be able to do unless I have a wrestler that actually left my school district to go to theirs. It's a matter of the way in which it happens. The PIAA, I thought, took affirmative steps to at least try to quell it, because they said, okay, anything after the 9th grade year, now we're going to start looking into it. But yet it's so ambiguous, because you can have, I know at least 10 wrestlers in the state of Pennsylvania currently this year that transferred from one school to another after the 9th grade year that are eligible to compete. So again, if you're saying school choice, free country this, free country that, you may end up winning this. In Bishop McCourt's case, there were specifics in that case that led them to be where they are at. That's all I can say about that. Is it's every case is different, every situation is different. People tend to look at the magnitude of the impact of it, and I always say Zane Rutherford. Zane Rutherford. The only reason he was ruled ineligible, I think, is because a certain parent of his could not keep their mouth shut on social media. If you would just, I think personally, you look at some of the people out there. If it's done a little bit more low key, you may be better off. Right, wrong, or indifferent. I just think that's the fact of the matter. So again, this is such a complex issue with different layers, and it's not fair. I can tell you that it's not fair, but life isn't fair, and equity is not always equitable, and equity isn't always what we want for life in general. We don't always want to have a fair, even playing field. Like sometimes it's good for wrestlers and for individuals as a whole to lose. I think losing helps somebody grow and become a better person in society after wrestling. So, I don't know. Again, I'm getting off topic. This is getting way off topic, Greg, but it's a complex issue.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think you said it right with Bishop McCourt, and the social media aspect, I think, was what ends up hurting them. But on to individuals, Jeff. We got postseason action coming up this weekend for AA. AAA has the weekend off. But for AA, things get underway on Friday at 5 o'clock from Cannon McMillan High School. And no section tournament this year. The first time there will not be the sections. And instead, it'll just be a one WPIAL tournament, something I think you and I have been in favor of for the last few years now. But the wrestling starts at 5 o'clock, pigtail round of 16, as well as 2 rounds of consies and the quarterfinals. And then on Saturday, wrestling starts at 10 a.m. with the second round of consolation semifinals set for 11:30. And then the championship finals and consolation finals will be at 4 o'clock. This year, instead of the top 7, it's now the top 8 that move on to the Southwest Regional, which will be at Peters Township High School this year. And that will be at the AHN Arena. And that will be 2 weeks from this past weekend. So AA is this weekend, then AAA will have their sections next week, where AA will be off, and then AA and AAA will be at it the week before Hershey. So one big WPIAL tournament, Jeff. Are you looking forward to it this weekend?
Well, I was going to ask you, how disappointed and upset are you that there's no sections this year, that we're not doing sections on Friday? And then, I know you've got to be bummed, right?
Yeah, we've been talking about it for years, how it's time to eliminate the section tournament. I think this was the right time. And, to me, I go back to when I wrestled, which is so many years ago now. But the section tournament meant something. You only had the top 3 wrestlers get out of the section tournament to go into a 9 wrestler field into the WPIL tournament. It made it very interesting. You definitely had to be very, it was a challenging tournament, in the sections, but now with, 5 guys going on and, now 6 guys, it got to be too much. It was like almost everybody was advancing, especially with some brackets where only 3 or 4 kids wrestled. But you look at some of these brackets, I think we talked pre-shows, are 37 teams in AA?
37 teams in AA, yeah.
37, how many kids are going to be in each weight class? At most, what are we looking at? Maybe 22 at most, maybe?
Yeah, based on numbers this year, I would say probably the average bracket size will be probably like 21, 22-ish. You may have some below that. You may have some a little bit above that. But, we know that all 37 teams are not going to have a guy at every weight. So I agree. You and I have been pretty vocal about this, that I think it was the right time to do. I actually am excited now for the District 7 championships, because I think it now, like you said, with the sections, like now it means something. Not that it didn't mean anything before, because now you're sending 8 guys off onto regionals, but I like the fact that you're not going to have a guy wrestle like the same 2 or 3 guys in 2 days, essentially. Like, how many times did we see it where a guy wrestled him in the section finals, the district finals the next day, and then at the regional tournament, the following week. So I think the wrestlers are going to like it better. I think coaches may like it better. I think the folks that aren't going to like it better are the smaller schools that want to have their wrestlers stay hungry and stay active in wrestling. But again, I don't know if having a small section tournament for just for the sake of having it is actually helping. I like the idea that we're just having a WPIAL championship, and let's call it a day, and 8 of them go on to the regional tournament. That's a lot, right? So I think it's okay. I think it's going to be fine. I think as long as they seed it correctly, which the track history of the WPIAL steering committee, wrestling committee, has been that they seed it normally always spot on. So I don't expect there to be any I can't believe this guy didn't make it because of a terrible draw. Now, there are some guys that may come in. Like I've heard Damon Michaels is coming back. He's had 0 matches, this year. So how are they going to seed him? Cole Waitman from Bell Vernon is recently back in the lineup, and he's going to get a few matches in under his belt before the postseason, individual postseason starts. But a guy like Damon Michaels, you don't have any matches, so how are you going to seed him? But overall, I think we're going to see the top 8 guys, essentially make it in most of those weights.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing about AA is they always seeded the WPIAL tournament by the 3 section champs, and then you cross bracketed them. Now this time they're going to have to actually seed them all the way out. And I'm assuming they're probably going to seed maybe the top 8, and then from there just kind of put them in. But
you would have to. I think you have to seed it by top 8 for sure.
Well, I would even say maybe you have to seed it by top 12.
Yeah.
And then from there probably throw them in. But yeah, I mean, when you look at it though, if you can't get it out of the tournament out of the top 8, then you are not within the top guys in the WPIAL. So could you get a wrong seed to the point where maybe you give a second and a third place guy, could have been flip-flopped perhaps, but I mean, I think that happens in any tournament. So, but you look at some of the weight classes, Jeff, 106, Parker Senapal's been on fire. He's the favorite going out of that weight class. 113, we should see a great final potential with Cooper Hornack and Jack Gonzalez.
Yeah, I mean, you just go through the weights and you look at some of them, and man, there's some damn good weights across the board, and especially at the top, right? You have guys that are ranked 1 and 2, 2 and 3 in the region, not just in District 7. So I'm excited. Again, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm excited to see because there's always somebody that drops or moves weights that we weren't expecting. And I'm excited to see who that is this year. I'm excited to see if anybody comes back in, like Damon Michaels. I would love to see him back in the mix. So there's going to be a lot of. Say it again.
Do you know what weight he'll be?
I would assume 38 or 45, but he hasn't weighed in, so it's hard to say because I can't tell you what he's been weighing recently. I expect in AAA we're going to see some drops for sure. I know of a few, and you'll see them in the updated rankings. But yeah, I'm excited because there's always a surprise, and but overall there's going to be a lot of good. There's a lot of depth in most weights, so there should be a lot of good wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, question is, will Gavin Suika be able to wrestle? Can he? And really, if you look at Suika, can he be healthy enough in 2 weeks that he can at least finish in the top 8 to advance on? Because the weight class there at 126, it's definitely deep, right? I mean, you look at Chris Vargo, Dylan Bruce. Bryce Rodriguez, Brandon Cruel, Tim Caffrelli, from Southside. You got a number of guys who are good at that weight class. But Gavin Suika, can he get in the top 8, even injured, and have 2 weeks to heal?
Yeah, I mean, and that's obviously a choice that he and his family and coaches and medical folks are going to have to make. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see him wrestle. Just knowing a little bit about him and how he is, I would think he's going to want to wrestle, but that doesn't mean he's necessarily going to have that opportunity. But you're right. That's something you got to consider is, hey, can I just get into the top 8? And, we've seen it before. We've seen it in the past where guys they come in with injuries and they just make it as far as they can. So that way they get, advance on. So maybe he does do something like that. But again, like you said, it's not like an easy weight. It's certainly not going to be one where he's just going to be able to make it to the finals and then injury default out, especially, with a foot injury as extensive as that is. So, yeah, I don't know, but just again, looking forward to some good wrestling. There's going to be a lot of good weights and we're excited for it.
Yeah, you might see another rematch of Joey Senapal and Kyle McCullum. Both guys have won matches against each other this year. And then you got some guys who are just at the top of the state level, Jeff, that we're going to get to see Grant McKay, Rune Lawrence, Patrick Cutchember, Dayton Pitzer, all guys who are going to be looking to finish at the top of the podium, and Hershey be wrestling here in the WPIAL championships this upcoming weekend.
Yep, looking forward to doing it.
Well, Jeff, as always, it's a pleasure. Can't believe that we're getting set for the individual portion of the WPIAL championships, but we got Double A for you this coming weekend. Make sure you stay with us here on PA Power Wrestling on Rockfin to make sure you stay with all the updated podcasts and rankings and everything we have going on. We'll have the obviously the wrestlers and what weight classes they'll be as soon as they are released for you to check out. But make sure you stay with us, and next week we'll be recapping Double A, and we'll be getting set for Triple A sections. And before you know it, Jeff, we'll be in Hershey for individuals.
Can't wait. It's coming up fast, man. It's here. It's actually not. It's not already coming. It's here. It's hit us. So buckle up, wrestling fans, as Chris Smith likes to say.
Oh man, you got to give him his props here.
I mean, if not, he's going to sue me, I'm sure. I don't want to. I want to go 2 years without seeing a cease and desist order from anybody else in wrestling. So let's keep it that way.
And with that being said, for Jeff Upson, I'm Greg Warnock. Thanks for watching and listening to WarUp on the WPIAL.